200 years ago today, 1825 in January, the thing that caught my eye was that William Hall, the CMS missionary, last week had a very bad asthma attack. Well, what he calls an asthmatical disorder. So I'm not sure exactly what he suffered from, but it involved his breathing and his coughing. So I don't know if any of you guys suffer from asthma.
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay, so so the thing is that it can be quite frightening. From what I've known from my children, is where you actually are struggling to breathe. You.
I, one of my workmates died of asthma.
Okay, okay. So what age was he?
He would have been about 40.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what William Hall struggled. He was he had come out with the first group of three families. He and Diane Hall, and in Christmas Day 1814, and so he had been in the country about 10 years. But it got too much for him, and by April he actually had, just the beginning of April, he had permission from the missionary committee in New Zealand to head back to New South Wales for his health, and he was given land at Blacktown, which was just further inland from Parramatta in Sydney, and it's where there was a community of Aboriginal Australians who are living, and so he worked. He had some land to work there, and he actually lived another. This is 1825. He lived to 1844, so he lived another almost 20 years or so. But in that lead up, after being there 10 years, it particularly affected him when he had a cold. So he talked about having a cold and a cough and a sore throat and things. And he had a series of these during 1824. So in May, he had twice in May and then in November. And when he had a cold, that really exacerbated his asthma. And I don't know if that's what you found. You found, Rod? Is it worse when you've got a cold?
It's if you've got a cold, it's pretty bad, but
Yeah,
it, it it's a pretty bad sort of thing to have if you can't get your breath.
yeah,
It can
yeah,
be frightening.
yeah. So um, it left him incapacitated for days at a time. He consulted the various ship's surgeons that came into on the boats. Each of the boats would have a surgeon on there. They'd have some of the missionaries had rudimentary sort of medical training, but the ship surgeons were engaged to be medical people. So he would consult with them. He would have blisters put on his chest. So that's what it's called. Bryce, you're a pharmacist. Have you heard of you've heard of blisters, Bryce?
No, no, I'm intrigued.
I don't sure if it's a poultice or whether it's a heated cup that's put on to try and
Oh, like cupping.
yeah, it might be like cupping, try and draw stuff out as
They heat
like
them
create
up.
a vacuum seal. And I'm not exactly sure what they're meaning by that, but he had that process a number of times, and also the old cutting of the arm and letting blood out, and he actually said he found relief from that. So it's hard to know if it's a psychological thing because the coughing and incessant coughing and that, I know of our children, the asthmatic bark of that came with a cold, that would from that. But you see, he was William Hall was a carpenter. he had when he was training to come out to New Zealand, he took a course in shipbuilding, and so it was William Hall who was the mastermind behind Henry Williams' project to build the Herald, and so they started that in June, July the previous year. So over this 6 months period, he had been sort of doing a design, and he had laid out the stern and various things, but now he's essentially hit the wall. He's not able to operate. So, but William Hall did 10 years in the mission, and had been through some pretty rough times. He had tried to in the early days establish a farm at Waitangi because they'd been given this land at Rangiahoa, and there just wasn't enough to really spread out and get some crops into the ground. And there was flat land at Waitangi, so they had, I think I talked about that with Richard Davis, because he later looked at Waitangi as well, and they were being offered land, but it was good land, but it was already being used by Maori, and so he didn't feel in good conscience he could take that land for the mission use. And the land that was spare at Waitangi wasn't good farming land, so they had to look elsewhere. But William Hall had seen that quite early on, and against the advice of Samuel Marsden, who wanted to keep them safe, that they went across there and started farming. Well, they got plundered and attacked by a Maori tribe. I think Diana Hall was struck on the head and caused an injury, and so they were, it became quite a frightening incident for them, and so they'd been through quite a bit. He is part of the vital infrastructure of building houses, building boats, rowboats, and now the Herald, which is going to sail to New South Wales, but essentially spent, and has to retire and withdraw to New South Wales from retirement. So that's the major event. It leaves Henry Williams having to complete the Herald by himself, or his team at Pai here, without William Hall. So takes him another year to do that. You can't sail during the winter time anyway. So, well, they weren't going to. They're going to wait to the summer next year to sail. So that was the deadline. So the Herald gets put on the back burner a bit, and they get on with other things. Oh, so what do you think?
Did Henry Hall have asthma before he came to New Zealand?
He said that asthmatic complaint that always seizes me when I take cold. That's how he described it in his diary. So I have a feeling that he would have had it from childhood, and but it's just getting out of control now. And these kind of conditions, a bit like with tuberculosis, they felt that they were climate related, and so they would have said the New Zealand climate's not suiting you. You need to go to a drier climate. So if they're in England, they would have gone off to the continent for their health, but here to New South Wales for one's health. I think that's right. We do have to do the same, don't we? We have to go to the Gold Coast and such like for our health. It's good.